I was pregnant when my own mother kicked me in the stomach, hard enough to make me scream, and drop to the floor. I never thought the life growing inside me would be put in danger by the person who gave me life. That moment changed everything, my family, my future, and the way I saw love. But what happened after, no one could have seen coming. Hello, I'm Sarah, 25 years old, and I was born and raised in a town called West Haven, where the streets are quiet, the houses all look the same, and the walls of my childhood home held more pain than comfort. From as early as I can remember, I knew I wasn't wanted. I was the second daughter, the unexpected one, the one who never quite fit into the perfect picture my mother painted for the world. Her name is Linda. She was known around our neighborhood as the elegant, charming woman who never aged and always smiled at the right times. But behind closed doors, her smile disappeared, and her words became knives. I grew up watching my older sister Lily receive everything I wished I could have: affection, praise, and that special look of pride in our mother's eyes. Lily was 3 years older than me, beautiful like our mother, graceful, smart, and always adored. She never saw how different things were for me. It wasn't her fault. Linda made sure to keep up appearances. In public, she called me her sweet Sarah. In private, she criticized the way I looked, the way I spoke, and the way I existed. My father, David, was kind but often absent. He worked long hours and traveled frequently for business. He never saw what happened when he wasn't around. As a child, I used to think that if I behaved better, studied harder, or smiled more, maybe she'd love me too. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. There were birthdays where Lily got designer clothes and I got clearance bin t-shirts. There were dinners where Linda would serve Lily second helpings of dessert while reminding me to watch my figure. I kept my pain to myself, afraid that if I spoke up, no one would believe me. Over time, I stopped trying to win her love and started planning my escape. That's when I made a promise to myself. One day, I would leave that house and never look back. I moved out the day I graduated high school. I didn't have much, just a small suitcase, a few savings from part-time jobs, and a heart full of determination. Linda stood at the doorway with her arms crossed, a smirk on her face. "You'll be back," she said flatly, as if my failure was a guarantee. I didn't reply. I just walked away. Lily was away at college and barely noticed I had left. My father, David, wasn't home that day. Maybe that made it easier. The first few months on my own were hard. I worked late shifts at a local diner and slept in a tiny studio apartment where the heater never worked and the walls were paper thin. But I didn't care. I was free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't under Linda's judgmental stare or her constant comparison to Lily. I could breathe, even if it meant barely scraping by. I applied to every clerical position I could find in the city. With only a high school diploma, most interviewers turned me away before I could finish a sentence. I remember one woman actually laughing when I said I didn't have a college degree. But I refused to let that discourage me. I had lived through worse. I kept showing up, resume in hand, believing that someone would give me a chance. After nearly 30 interviews and months of rejection, I finally got a call from a mid-sized tech company based downtown. The HR manager told me, "We don't just hire degrees. We hire people." That one sentence changed everything. I started as a front desk receptionist, but within weeks, I was cross-training in customer service. I was eager, dependable, and always the first to arrive and the last to leave. I finally felt seen for my work, not judged by my background. That's where I met James. James was a systems technician at the company, quiet, focused, and the kind of person who always helped others without being asked. Our first real interaction happened over a broken printer. I was new and completely flustered trying to fix a paper jam with a line of annoyed coworkers forming behind me. James walked over calmly, crouched down beside the machine, and said with a small smile, "Mind if I give it a try?" In less than a minute, the problem was solved. He didn't say much afterward, just nodded and returned to his office, but something about his calm presence stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, he started stopping by my desk during slow moments. Sometimes it was just to say hi, sometimes to ask if I wanted coffee from the break room. Slowly, our conversations became longer. Books we liked, music we didn't, random life stories. He listened when I spoke, really listened, which was something I hadn't experienced much growing up. I kept waiting for the moment when he'd lose interest or see me as someone beneath him because of my education, my past, or the baggage I didn't talk about yet. But that moment never came. When he finally asked me out one Friday afternoon, I was surprised by how easy it was to say yes. We started meeting on weekends, grabbing coffee, going to movies, taking long walks through the city. With him, I didn't feel like the unwanted daughter or the girl who was never enough. I felt like a person. I felt safe. It took me several months to open up about my family. One evening, while we were sitting in his apartment after dinner, I told him about Linda. About how I'd grown up in the same house as my sister, but lived a completely different life. About the silence, the favoritism, the things that hurt more than bruises. I was terrified he'd think I was too damaged, too broken to be loved. But James didn't flinch. He held my hand and said, "No one has the right to make you feel unworthy, not even your own mother." That night, for the first time in years, I cried in front of someone. And I wasn't ashamed. 2 years into our relationship, just before Christmas, James proposed. It was snowing lightly, and we had just left our company's holiday party. The streets of downtown West Haven were glowing with string lights and holiday cheer. As we walked hand in hand, James suddenly stopped under a street lamp, turned to me, and got down on one knee. He didn't give a long speech or make a dramatic gesture. He simply looked into my eyes and said, "Sarah, will you marry me?" I didn't even have to think about it. "Yes," I whispered, my heart full and steady for the first time in my life. Telling my family was another matter. James and I agreed to visit them together. I hadn't been back to my childhood home in 2 years. I hadn't missed it, but part of me hoped, maybe foolishly, that getting engaged might soften the sharp edges in Linda's heart. Maybe this would be the moment she finally saw me as something more than a disappointment. Lily was the first to greet us when we arrived. She looked genuinely happy to see me and hugged me tightly. "Sarah, it's been so long," she said with that same easy smile she always carried. She had no idea how different our experiences growing up really were. My father, David, was still at work but due home soon. Linda greeted us with a strained smile that cracked the moment she looked directly at me. "Oh," she said, turning to James, I wasn't expecting company. Let me see what I can throw together." A few minutes later, she returned with a tray of overly sweet cookies. James had once casually mentioned he liked sweets when we got married. I had never liked them, and Linda knew that. "Oh, I forgot. Sarah doesn't care for sugar, right?" she said with a mock-apologetic tone. James handled the moment with grace. "I'm just happy to be here," he said politely, but his eyes met mine for a second. He had noticed the dig. That quiet support meant more than any grand defense. When we all sat down in the living room, I felt my chest tighten. I took a deep breath. "We came today because we have something important to tell you," I began. Linda's eyes sharpened, already suspicious. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice steady despite the tension. Lily gasped and jumped up, pulling me into a hug. "Sarah, congratulations," she said. But Linda, she didn't even try to fake it. Her face went cold, her lips thinned, and for a brief second, I saw something in her expression that scared me more than anything she had ever said. After the announcement, the room fell quiet. Lily was still beaming, asking how far along I was. 3 months, I said softly, placing a hand over my stomach. James stood up and excused himself to take a work call outside. Lily offered to make tea and headed into the kitchen. I was left alone with Linda. The air shifted instantly. Her smile vanished like it had never existed. She stared directly at me, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite describe. Contempt, jealousy, rage. Then she whispered through clenched teeth, "Why did it have to be you?" Her voice trembled with suppressed anger, and my body froze. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Before I could gather my thoughts, Linda stood up from the sofa, took one step forward, and with no warning, kicked me hard in the stomach. Pain ripped through me like lightning. I screamed and collapsed onto the floor, holding my belly in shock and terror. My body curled instinctively, as if trying to protect the life inside me. From the kitchen, I heard Lily shout, "Mom? What did you just—" Her voice cracked in panic as she ran into the room. James burst through the front door seconds later, phone still in hand, panic flooding his face. He dropped to his knees beside me as I gasped for air. "Sarah, what happened?" he shouted, trying to support my back. "She kicked me," I choked out. Lily stood frozen for a second, then turned to Linda, who had the nerve to calmly say, "She just tripped into the dresser. Stop overreacting." "I saw it," Lily screamed, her voice shaking. "I saw you kick her." Without wasting another second, James grabbed his phone and called 911. "We need both an ambulance and the police," he said, giving the address. My pregnant wife was just attacked by her mother. He held my hand tightly while we waited, his voice low and steady as he whispered, "I'm right here. Don't let go." Lily sat beside me, tears falling freely, repeating, "It's going to be okay. Hang in there, Sarah. Please, hang in there." The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. I was barely conscious by the time the paramedics arrived. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I saw Linda standing silently near the doorway, arms crossed, no regret on her face, only cold, bitter silence. But she wouldn't walk away this time. The police arrived right behind the ambulance. After listening to James and Lily and seeing my condition, the officers approached Linda. "You're under arrest for assaulting a pregnant woman," one of them said calmly as they placed her in handcuffs. That was the last thing I saw before the ambulance doors shut. The ride to the hospital felt like a blur. The paramedics spoke calmly, checking my vitals and placing gentle pressure around my abdomen. I could barely respond. The pain was overwhelming, but even worse was the fear that something had happened to the baby. James rode with me, gripping my hand, his knuckles white. Lily followed close behind in her own car, calling my father on the way. At the hospital, the medical team moved quickly. I was rushed into a private room, placed on monitoring equipment, and surrounded by doctors and nurses. They checked the fetal heartbeat, ran ultrasounds, and watched for signs of trauma. James stood beside me the entire time, only letting go of my hand when a nurse asked him to wait just outside while they performed a pelvic exam. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor returned with an update. He placed a reassuring hand on my arm and said, "Your baby is safe. The heartbeat is strong. There's a small amount of internal bruising, but nothing threatening the pregnancy. We'll keep you for observation." James re-entered the room and finally breathed out the relief he had been holding in. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Thank God." Lily arrived minutes later with red, puffy eyes. She ran straight to my bedside. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never imagined she was capable of this. I should have seen it." "It's not your fault," I told her quietly. She made sure no one ever saw what she really was. An hour later, my father David arrived. He looked pale, like the blood had drained from his face. "Sarah," he said as he stepped into the room. His voice cracked with emotion. "Lily told me everything. Is it true?" He didn't wait for me to answer before turning toward Lily, silently pleading for confirmation. Lily nodded, her voice firm for the first time that day. "I saw it, Dad. She kicked Sarah. On purpose." David sat down in the chair beside my bed, stunned. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he whispered. I swallowed hard. "Because she always played the loving mother in front of you. You wouldn't have believed me back then." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "You saw what you wanted to see." A soft knock interrupted the conversation. A woman in a navy blue blazer stepped in. She was a hospital social worker. "Hi, Sarah. I'm here to check on you and talk about what happened," she said with gentle professionalism. "Given your condition and the nature of the assault, this is being treated as a serious case." David looked stunned. "Is she, my wife, really going to be charged?" "Yes," the social worker replied firmly. "The police have taken her into custody. And because the victim is pregnant, the charges are more severe. She could face jail time." That was the first moment it started to feel real. Linda had always been untouchable, a storm no one could stop. But now, for the first time, there were consequences. The room fell into heavy silence after the social worker's words. I looked at my father, who had his head bowed in his hands, disbelief and shame clouding his face. Lily stood on the other side of the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if holding back the weight of guilt she didn't deserve to carry. For the first time in my life, I felt something shift, not just in the air around me, but inside me. I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending everything had been fine just because it was easier for others. I took a deep breath and said, "I think it's time I tell the truth. All of it." David lifted his head slowly, his eyes glassy. "I want to hear it," he said quietly. So I started. I told them everything. About the favoritism. About the way Linda always made Lily out to be the golden child and treated me like I was an inconvenience. I talked about the cruel comments, the withheld affection, the way she would wait until we were alone to let her real feelings out. I told them how she shamed me for how I looked, what I wore, and what I chose. How she would smile in front of guests and then humiliate me once they were gone. How she told me I would never amount to anything with just a high school diploma. How she said she regretted ever having me. Lily's hands were covering her face now. "I never knew," she whispered through her fingers. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I always thought you liked being low-key. I thought you wanted simple things. I didn't see it." "You couldn't have," I said softly. "She never treated you the way she treated me." David looked at me, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because she fooled you, too," I said. "She wore a mask around you. Around everyone. And I was afraid that if I told the truth, no one would believe me." At that moment, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't a doctor or a nurse. It was Linda. She had somehow been allowed to speak with us before being transferred to the police station. 2 officers stood behind her, watching closely. "You're all turning against me," she said through tears that didn't reach her eyes. "I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me." Her voice rose with every word. "You're ungrateful. I raised you. You hurt me." I replied coldly, my voice stronger than I expected. "You hurt me over and over again, and you never thought there'd be consequences." David stood up slowly. "You're unfit to be a mother, Linda." Her mouth opened to yell something else, but the social worker stepped in and gave a quiet nod to the officers. "That's enough. We've seen what we needed to see." The officers moved forward, one of them gently taking Linda by the arm. "Time to go, ma'am." As they let her out of the room, she jerked her head toward me one last time. "I'll never forgive you for this." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply turned my head away and whispered, "I'll never need you to." After Linda was removed from the hospital, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was like a storm had finally passed, but the cleanup was just beginning. The next morning, the hospital's legal team and social worker returned to speak with me. They explained that I had every right to press charges and that the law viewed an attack on a pregnant woman as a serious felony. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to press charges." James supported me from the moment I made the decision. Lily stayed by my side every day, helping with paperwork and even speaking to the detective assigned to the case. My father, David, filed for divorce from Linda the very next week. He moved in temporarily with a relative while finalizing the paperwork. "I should have seen it," he said one evening, sitting by my hospital bed. "All those years, I just looked the other way." "You didn't know," I told him honestly. "But now you do. And now you're doing the right thing." 2 weeks later, the case officially moved forward. Linda was charged with felony assault and domestic violence. Because I was pregnant at the time of the attack, the charges were upgraded. The medical reports, witness statements from James and Lily, and my testimony made the case strong. Linda tried to paint herself as the victim, but her lies unraveled quickly in court. While the legal process unfolded, I focused on recovery. The doctors monitored my pregnancy closely. At 5 months, I went in for my 20-week anatomy scan. James and I held hands as the technician smiled at the screen. Everything looks great, she said. Do you want to know the gender? James looked at me and grinned. You ready? I nodded. The technician turned the screen toward us and said, Congratulations. It's a boy. I felt tears fill my eyes.
A boy.
A healthy baby boy. Jack, I whispered. We had chosen the name months ago, but now it felt real. James kissed my forehead, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel joy again. We bought baby clothes. James's mother, Susan, brought over hand-knit blankets and tiny socks. She started calling me her daughter, not daughter-in-law. You're family now, Sarah. That means something, she told me, holding my hand as I sat beside her on the porch one afternoon. Her kindness felt like healing. Lily found an apartment close by and moved in just 2 blocks away. She said she wanted to be there for Jack from the beginning. David retired early, saying, I miss so much already. I'm not missing another moment. The trial took place when I was around 7 months pregnant. I wore a loose, comfortable maternity dress and walked slowly into the courtroom with James on one side and Lily on the other. My belly had started to show clearly by then, and every step felt heavier. But I held my head high. I was no longer the invisible daughter in Linda's shadow. I was a mother-to-be, a survivor, and a woman who had finally found her voice. The courtroom was quiet as the judge reviewed the charges. The prosecution presented my medical records, hospital photos, and testimony from both James and Lily. The social worker who had witnessed Linda's behavior at the hospital also testified, describing Linda's denial, manipulation, and lack of remorse. Linda sat across the room in a stiff gray suit, arms crossed, still wearing the same icy expression she had always worn around me. When her lawyer tried to argue that the attack had been accidental, that I had fallen into a dresser, the judge didn't buy it. Multiple witnesses saw you strike your pregnant daughter, the judge said firmly. There is no justification for this level of violence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly and faced the court. My voice trembled at first, but then steadied as I said, My mother didn't just hurt me that day. She spent my whole life making me feel unwanted, unloved, and unworthy. But I'm done being silent. I won't let her treat me like I don't matter anymore. And I won't let my son grow up thinking that kind of abuse is ever okay. The courtroom was still as I returned to my seat. The judge's ruling came shortly after. Linda was found guilty of felony assault on a pregnant woman and sentenced to prison. She received a 2-year sentence with additional restrictions, including mandatory counseling and a no-contact order. There was no dramatic outburst from her. She just sat still, her jaw clenched as the bailiff led her out of the courtroom in handcuffs. When we stepped outside into the afternoon sun, I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The final weeks of pregnancy passed slowly, filled with gentle moments, quiet support, and a deep sense of waiting. I attended my last few prenatal checkups surrounded by James, Lily, and sometimes even Susan, who insisted on helping me pack my hospital bag and make freezer meals for after the baby arrived. David came by every weekend, bringing fresh groceries and books on grandparenting. It's never too late to start over, he said one afternoon, as he placed his hand gently on my belly. Jack is getting the version of me I should have been for you. When I finally went into labor, it was early morning. The contractions started mild, but became intense quickly. James rushed me to the hospital, and Lily met us there. The nurses prepped me for delivery while the doctor came in to check my progress. You're at 6 centimeters, she said. You're doing great. Labor lasted 16 hours. There were moments I wanted to give up from exhaustion, moments when I gripped James's hand so tightly that I thought I might never let go. Lily stayed beside me the entire time, gently wiping my forehead and whispering, You're so strong, Sarah. Jack is almost here. Finally, the doctor's voice broke through the haze. One more push, Sarah. Just one more. I closed my eyes, focused all my strength, and pushed with everything I had left. Then I heard it, a loud, beautiful cry that filled the room. It's a boy, the nurse announced. A very healthy baby boy. Tears streamed down my face as they placed him on my chest. His skin was warm and soft, his tiny hands curled into fists. I looked at James, who was already crying beside me, his hand on our son's back. "Jack," I whispered, cradling him close. "Welcome to the world." Outside in the waiting room, David and Susan were waiting. When they saw James walking out with the news, David's eyes filled with tears. "He's here?" he asked. James nodded. "He's perfect." Susan held Jack gently a few hours later, her smile tender and proud. "He's got your eyes," she said, looking at me. "And James's mouth." Lily took pictures and joked that Jack already had the best features of both of us. The room was filled with laughter, quiet joy, and love. The kind of love I had always imagined, but never thought I'd feel. 3 months passed after Jack's birth, and our days slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, quiet feedings in the early hours. Motherhood was exhausting and overwhelming, but it was also the most fulfilling thing I had ever experienced. Every time Jack wrapped his tiny fingers around mine or fell asleep against my chest, I felt something deep inside me heal. Our apartment, once just a space James and I shared, now felt like a home. Jack's presence brought warmth to every corner. Susan visited regularly, bringing over home-cooked meals and hand-knitted baby clothes. She never failed to remind me, "You're doing such a good job, Sarah." Her kindness was so steady and natural that sometimes it brought me to tears. Lily stopped by nearly every day, helping with laundry or rocking Jack to sleep when I was too tired to move. "You're not alone anymore," she told me one evening, her voice soft and sincere. David had changed, too. Retirement had given him time to reflect, and Jack had given him purpose. He visited every weekend, holding Jack for hours and telling him stories about back in the day, even though Jack was too young to understand. One afternoon, as he helped me settle Jack into his crib, he turned to me and said, "I know I can't undo the past, Sarah, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." I began attending a support group for mothers with complicated family histories. We sat in a circle, sipping tea, sharing stories, some painful, some hopeful. At first, I just listened, unsure if I could open up. But over time, I spoke. I told them about Linda, about the abuse, the jealousy, the silence. I told them about the trial, the conviction, and the moment I finally felt free. And I told them about Jack, about how one small life had given me the courage to start over. By the time Jack turned 6 months old, we threw a small celebration in our backyard. It was nothing fancy, just a few close friends, some balloons, and laughter floating through the air. Susan took photos while David grilled on the patio. Lily played with Jack on a picnic blanket, pretending to lose at peekaboo just to make him laugh. James stood beside me, holding my hand as the sun began to set. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. I looked at him, then at our son, then at the family we had built. "Yes," I said with a smile. "Very." One night, not long after Jack's 6-month celebration, I woke up to the faint sound of him stirring in his crib. I gently picked him up and sat in the rocking chair, the room quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. As I fed him, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, messy hair, but a calm I had never known before. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. That's when I remembered Linda. I hadn't heard much since the trial. One voice message had come through a few days after Jack's birth, before I blocked her number completely. It was cold, full of bitterness. "You made me lose everything," she had said. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I later learned she had been transferred to a state correctional facility 2 towns over. Her sentence was being served, her rights restricted. There would be no more pretending, no more performance, no more threats. Legally, she could not come near me or Jack again. She was gone. And this time it was permanent. Surprisingly, I didn't feel hatred when I thought of her. Not anymore. What I felt was sadness, for the life she chose, for the love she never gave, and for the way she pushed away her own daughter before I ever had a chance to be close to her. I stood up and walked Jack gently back to his crib. His tiny chest rose and fell with peaceful breaths. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You'll never feel what I felt. I promise you that." These days, our life is quieter, simpler, and so full of love it sometimes catches me off guard. James and I take Jack on walks through West Haven's quiet parks. Lily often joins, and sometimes David brings old photo albums to show Jack where he came from. Susan still brings over new baby clothes and always insists on holding Jack for just a few more minutes. And as I watch Jack grow, I think about the future, not with fear, but with hope. The cycle is broken. The past no longer defines me. I am not Linda's daughter anymore. I am Jack's mother. And that is more than enough. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please take a moment to leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that matter. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.